is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
Where is Melodee Buzzard? That is the question that authorities, family, anyone interested in this case are still asking. Ashley Buzzard, now arrested. It's a case that really, when it comes down to it, when you really start to examine what's going on here, it's a mental health crisis. One with legs, one with a driver's license, one with agency to move and to explore the crisis as if it were reality. That's what we're going to be exploring here. Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author, joining us to break down this case. I'm trying to grab your book over here so I can hold it up. Here we go. Your memoir, Nightbird, out right now, and also The Minds of Mass Killers, available wherever books are sold. Shavaun, let's start here. This didn't start the day Melodee went missing. Family had sounded alarms for years, reports that she hadn't been seen by some relatives for a very long time, questions about schooling, paperwork, the home, the living conditions described as squalor. And then there's wigs, there's a road trip, there's a swapped license plate, and finally no child on the return trip. When you add all of this up, this looks like a very long runway to crisis that everyone could see and no one could stop. I want to start there about all of this, where people could see it, the family could see it, others could see it, but the way our system works allowed her to just kind of keep tooling along the world with being the caregiver of her daughter, Melodee. How is this how it works?
We have the most dysfunctional system when it comes to keeping kids safe. And how I would frame this, it's like there wasn't any one single big red flag, but there were yellow flags, one after another, after another, after another, that went on for years. And unfortunately, in the current legal situation with the courts and the Department of Child and Family Services in most places, it has to rise to such a level of risk. I mean, basically, you can say there has to be blood on the floor before legal action can be taken. And we need to do it differently, although that's very hard to do because there are very strong forces that are highly political that stress parental rights and will fight these attempts to redo the system. I mean, there are political forces that say we need to do away with child protection agencies and that parent rights trump all. But I don't think, as you said, there was any question here that there was a mental health condition going on. I did see one of the interviews, which certainly would fit, is that the mother, Ashley, had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, had a prior psychiatric hospitalization. And we know that, of course, bipolar disorder is not uncommon, but you can look at it on a continuum. And when people have a severe case, they often become delusional. They may have hallucinations and they get paranoid. Super, super common. But there are lots and lots, literally millions of people, I would guess, out there with mental health conditions who are raising children. And it's horrifying to see. And often yellow flag after yellow flag after yellow flag.
And when we have these flags, there's not a lot outside forces can do. And we're speaking specifically on the Buzzard case, but I mean, you can apply this to almost any sort of situation. If you have a son, a daughter, a brother, whoever, someone in your life that you care about, whether it's blood or not, you're someone who gives a damn about their well-being, and you see that there is something that is taking over them, that there is a mental health condition that is spiraling and they need help. Those are not usually the folks who are suffering that are going to raise their hand and go, there's something really off here, really wrong. Oftentimes they don't even realize anything's going on. It's those on the outside that are seeing it. But who has the power to get help in those situations?
Well, what I would suggest to families where they have doubts about somebody's stability and ability to care for their child is make report after report after report, keep notes, document if you get weird messages or strange voicemails, document, keep dates, stick to the facts, and keep reporting over and over and over, because sometimes you don't see action with the first or the second report, but if there's a consistent pattern, and the more people who report, the better. You may start to see that there are visits out to the home. And again, that's no promise that anything is going to change quickly. But sometimes that's all you can do, is just keep rattling the cage. You can report to police. You can report to the Child Protection Agency, but you just have to keep doing it.
So, Shavaun, where's this line between somebody is troubled, like they are starting to spiral, and where is dangerous? Where does that line get crossed that, holy crap, we need to do something, this child is in danger, or mom or dad, they're suffering from a mental illness and they're just having a rough go of it? Because, the state of the world is such that you're going to have some difficult days. That's just how it goes. But when do they cross over to, we need to do something now?
A huge gray area there, right? And I think legally, I don't agree with this, but I think legally the risk has to be current, demonstrable, and basically the child is neglected, abused, or not having their basic needs for food and shelter met. And it has to be so extreme that the child is at imminent risk. And how is that going to be determined? I've seen families in the community mental health system where the parents were homeless, living in a tent, and reports had been made that the child was not sufficiently sheltered, but when it was investigated, it didn't meet the bar for any kind of immediate action. And then even if it does get to a judge, the priority of the court pretty uniformly is to come up with a reunification plan or a safety plan in order to keep the family together. And keeping the family together seems to be a higher priority than keeping children safe and in a home where they're well cared for. So it's a huge gray area. And yeah, courts can't remove kids due to a parental eccentric behaviors or even hallucinations, as long as the kids are fed, sheltered, and their very basic needs are met. Nothing changes. And that's where I think we just have to keep speaking out about it. And relatives who are seeing these things, they just have to keep calling.
Who's making the judgment call on whether this is a safe place for the kids? And what sort of qualifications do they have to be making these judgment calls? Because we see this far too often where, well, someone did visit and they thought, well, this is still satisfactory enough to keep the kids there.
Yeah, I've never been a child welfare employee or a social worker in that capacity, but I think they have a checklist and a scoring system. And this has ultimately been something that's put together by states and local counties. And so you find it can be somewhat different in every locale, which again is a problem. You don't have consistency from one community to another. And so a parent that may be flagged in one county can move across, move literally across the street and now be under the radar again in a different location. But ultimately, if a case gets in front of a judge, it would be the judge's call. And judges typically will go for a family safety plan or reunification plan, and the Department of Children's Services is in charge of coming up with that plan. So it's all done according to a checklist, and it may be everything that the social workers would like to see something change and want to see something happen. And as I've mentioned before, I have had a lot of those folks come to therapy in distress over their inability to see movement, in the court system.
Wow.
Ultimately, you hope that someone who is in that position as a CPS worker, or whatever capacity, whatever title it may be in whatever state, that the interest is that of the welfare of the children. But on a complete professional level, let's take emotion out of it. Let's take the welfare of the children out of it for a moment to better understand what is the motivating factor here. What's going on when they have a caseload that's far larger than they're ever going to be able to tackle because there's not enough of them and they're understaffed and they're underpaid. And in no way am I trying to say anything bad about the people who are working in this world, in this area, with good intentions, that are doing their job and doing the best they can. They are saints, and they all get burned out at some point, and rightfully so. But let's just for a moment look at the kind of the structure of all of this. How does this work? Is there a reason? Is there incentive? Is there a reason why one would want to, like, let's mark this off as okay and move on to our next one? Because of time constraints, because of staffing constraints, because of this or that, the ability to pay enough attention where they want to, where they should be, where they can or can't. What are some of these other factors that are playing in here relative to the job requirements and what they need to do to basically get their job done and check the box at the end of the day to keep collecting a paycheck?
Yeah, I think it's just built into the structure of the system. You know, you nailed it with there aren't enough social workers to keep up. And there have been cases, fortunately rare, but there have been cases where there was a bad outcome. A child died. And when they went back and, you know, did an audit and went over everything, the notes of the social worker had been falsified and they really had not laid eyes on the kids. So these people work under tremendous pressure, and it's just flawed. You know, from the basic rules that prioritize family reunification above all, which was based on really old research going back decades that was the way it should go. And we
want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk about that specifically of the family reunification, because, I mean, look, I mean, in some cases, does it make sense? Sure. In many, I don't know. I mean, I'm just basing on my experience, what I've seen with school systems, with people, with kids and some families. I don't know. I would venture to say more than not, there shouldn't be any sort of reunification, because that's where the problem started to begin with. And if we're looking at patterns of behavior of people tend to have patterns of behavior, and they tend to keep doing the same stupid shit over and over and over. And the system doesn't seem to account for any of that when it comes to family reunification. So let's go way back. Why was this the best idea at some point in time, and why does it not make any sense today?
Yeah, I believe it goes back to research that was done in the 70s, you know, and there was one study that I don't think was a well done study, but somebody, you know, got this into the legislative system, that children did better in being reunified with their families than they did in foster care. And society, I have to say, I think it's deteriorated a lot since then. Yeah. We've got way more people with drug problems that have left them impaired. That is just a huge problem. And you know, what we talked a few weeks ago about the date, I believe it was in the 1920s, that we didn't even have laws in this country about child abuse that people could be prosecuted, you know. And so the very first case that was prosecuted was in New York, a child abuse case, and they had to prosecute it under a cruelty to animals law, because we didn't have any laws about cruelty to children being a crime. So we're way out of reality here with, you know, even having judges that have adequate training in child development and what kids need and the impact of bouncing around. There are laws now that kids, if they've been in foster care for X number of years, I don't remember how long it is, 2 or 3 years or something like that, that they do need to look at terminating parental rights. But that's fairly new. And, you know, so that is a change, but we need to do a lot more. And yeah, you're right. It's like, as I say, yellow flag after yellow flag after yellow flag. There's a pattern here. And, you know, some of the things we can do are get teams where you have, not just reports to law enforcement, but where you team clinicians, mental health clinicians with law enforcement that go out into the home when there have been reports, and you spend time doing an evaluation. And that's not something that's done now. It typically is a quick checklist, or they go out, the parents don't answer the door. And so it gets delayed, and it can take ages to even get anybody out there to visit.
Well, and that doesn't seem right. I mean, if somebody says, I haven't seen my nephew or my niece, in 6 months, 3 months, whatever that time frame is, and I'm concerned, that should trigger immediate action from some sort of authorities. And granted, you're going to have some of these cases where you've got, your paranoid Uncle Jeff, who's just not in his right mind and he drinks a lot or whatever the case may be. But it would be concerning if this child weren't in school, if homeschooling isn't showing any accountability for this child. There are lots of things that start stacking, and we need to do something and see, where is this child? Produce this child. I don't understand why we don't have immediate action when the data stacks up as it does. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're right. I agree with you completely. And I think a lot of times in these cases where people make false complaints,
right.
And one of the things that's looked at is, has there been contention in the family where people are fighting and they don't get along, or there's been a bad divorce or a bad custody battle going on. And so people will start making false complaints to CPS. So that's another thing that they have to evaluate. Are these family members just angry because they're not getting visitation with the child because there's a breach in the family system? And, so a lot of times the kids aren't in danger, but you're right. You don't know. And particularly when you layer one thing on top of another, the child is not in school, there was a quick withdrawal, or when the child was in school, they show up without a coat when it's snowing outside. I've seen cases like that. I've seen cases where the school janitor bought a child a coat because they were so worried about the child and they couldn't get anybody to take action because the kid would show up cold. So,
well, what are we, at the end of the day, look, you're either going to have common sense on how to raise a child or you're not. And having a CPS worker come over there and scold you and go through their checklist and say you're failing isn't going to magically make them a better parent.
No.
But that seems to be how we think it's going to work. And we don't do anything about it. We're like, well, let's wait till it gets even worse, and then maybe we can take the kids away. Yeah. Till then, we're going to write you up. We're going to say, you need to change this, so the next time we come around. And if they don't, and they won't, and most times they don't, because they're not capable.
Right.
And that seems to be a thing that, again, this is a word a lot of people don't like to use because people would rather go with hopeful language. I'm just being real. Some people are not capable of certain shit, and that may be some very basic things. And if we can recognize that they're just not capable, they're not, if they're too stupid to put a coat on their child, if they can't figure out how to crack an egg and make them food, they're not capable of caring for a child. There's many, many ways you can care for a child with very, very little income. There are.
Yeah.
But you have to be intelligent enough to figure out how to do that. And if these people clearly are struggling and taking care of themselves, why the hell are we sitting here thinking, oh yeah, you can certainly take care of these 5 that you shit out?
Yeah, no, that's a real problem. And often the folks with the least capacity to care for their kids are the ones that have the most kids. They have a lot of children. Yeah. And that's showing impaired judgment. That's showing a likely mental health problem or an addiction problem. And sending them to 6 sessions of a parenting class it's not going to change that they, as you say, they don't have the capacity.
Again, though, Boy, I'm playing devil's advocate here because I sit here as somebody who chose not to have children, intentionally did not want to have children. But aren't we taking away people's ability to, I hate saying it, but isn't it their right to have children if they want to? I mean.
No.
Okay, well, but how do you stop them?
Not if you can't care for the kid, no.
But how do you know if you can't care for them?
they're struggling, if they're barely able to eat, they're not getting nutrition, they're not being cared for by societal standards. It's not your right just to keep. It's like having a prisoner at that point. But the way our system works, it does tend to work more like, yes, this is your right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Believe me, I feel like we should limit who can have kids.
Oh,
I really
agree.
do.
Yeah.
But, I'm sitting back going, well, I'm sure there's somebody out there saying, well, wait a minute, you can't take away people's rights to have children if they want it.
You can't do that, but you can take away the children if you're not going to take care of them. The same way they can take away a pet.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but we live in a country based upon the rights of the individual. And that seems to be, when the legal system, when laws are created, the rights of the individual come first in everything. It's just like people have the right to be mentally ill on the street and eat out. I was told that in one of the agencies when I was trying to do a adult protective services report because a guy who was severely mentally ill was eating out of trash cans. Okay. Garbage dumps outside of restaurants. And it was just horrifying to me. And I said, can't he be taken in for a 5150? It was the law in California where you're placed on a 72-hour hold, evaluated, try to get him into treatment. We live in a country where I was told by a county attorney, the law says we live in a country where you are free to be crazy on the street and eat out of garbage cans if that's your choice. And, if that were my relative, I would want to be rescuing them from that. And we do these things that we think are all about individual rights, but there's a lack of compassion. And it doesn't sound very wise. So, I vote for Tony for president.
Rights aren't rights when they're hurting people. That's not a right. That no longer is a right. And that's the insane part of all of this. Well, answer me this. I want to ask about the parenting classes where, we're going to send you to the parenting class. Tell me, honestly, in your experience, how often do folks go to these parenting classes and come out different people?
Yeah, they don't come out different people. They don't.
They get a certificate. They get a certificate to put on their dirty refrigerator. Yeah,
and they may learn the jargon that they're supposed to say. I would support my child's self-esteem. What does that mean? How do you do that? And I've asked parents those questions after parenting classes. And when you explore a little deeper, how does this actually change how they behave with their kid? It doesn't. No. And they don't have a clue. But it's sort of like sending, domestic violence offenders who are chronically violent with women they're involved in and sending them to anger management. It's like, same frustration. There's so much wrong. Yeah.
We do these things because it makes us feel better. Because it makes...
We're checking the box.
Exactly. Yeah. It's checking the box. We're saying we did everything we could by saying, go into this box over here and come out a different person. Yeah. Shake the box up. Still, actually more damage. They just have more skills on how to work the system at the end of the day. And we expect different results, and we've done it forever. Yeah. Why do you think we can't get reform in these areas? Why is it that this, I keep saying it, I would think this would be a big ballot issue, that if somebody were to campaign on this, people would be like, oh my God, this is horrible. Yes, we need to reform this, but we never see it happen. It's always some other one-off that gets people enraged on something that affects a minute portion of the population. This is big. This is tons and tons. This is the future generations here and a huge chunk of it. And we're just like, good luck. Why, in your opinion, do you think it is that we never see any sort of reforms on this come to light and it just kind of sits status quo?
I think there's just a huge social denial. People don't like to think about it. They skip over the awful stories in the news. It's like, oh, that's negative. I don't want to think about it. And they go into this magical thinking where they actually believe that the system works because it's too uncomfortable to look at the truth. And I think we do a better job. As you know, I'm on Facebook, social media. I'm involved because I care about animals too. And there is so much attention on social media about loving animals, which that's why I'm in the groups, because I believe in that. But that's a more comfortable topic, taking care of our pets and taking care of the abandoned animals or the abused animals. People get really fired up about that. But there's this denial about the situation of many kids in our society. And I think on, what do people talk about on most YouTube channels? They're not talking about cruelty to kids that often. They're talking about other things. And I appreciate so much that this is an area of passion for you, and that you're willing to go there and spend some time digging in.
Well, and the reality is the infrastructures, the YouTubes and things out there, they shut these sort of conversations down because they're icky, because they're uncomfortable, because they make people feel triggered. Yeah. Be triggered.
Yeah.
There's a reason you're triggered, because there's a problem, and pretending it doesn't exist or throttling the topic doesn't help anyone. Yeah. But that's, that's how it works. Would it be better if we found some sort of pill to give children that makes them extremely furry and hairy, so they started resembling small wolves rather than children? Would people start giving a shit maybe a little bit more?
Probably. It's easier to care about animals. But if we're going to talk, magic solutions, let's go with people can only earn their sexual organs after they've demonstrated a certain capacity for good judgment. And so you're just preventing procreation, when folks do not have a certain standard of, I have the capacity to care for a life I may be creating here.
Can I jump in and be really controversial for just a second?
You did the wolf pill thing as a child, didn't you?
No, I did not. But let's think this through, and I'm going to upset somebody out there. That's fine. But you have to take driving lessons. You have to take a test to get your driver's license. What if we are all infertile until we've passed our parenting test?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
I don't freaking know. I don't know. I'm just I have no idea.
Well, Mormons have magic underwear. I mean, that's worked so well.
Are they that wrong at this point? I mean,
well, it hasn't worked. They just tend to reproduce a lot of them. And then a few of them end up going off and making other versions of their religion. They all go, that's not like us. Not at all.
Us material. Yeah, I know.
I think it's kind of interesting. We're talking about the animal kingdom and things like that. In the animal kingdom, if there are animals that are bad parents and they're not taking care of their young, other members of that species will step in and be the parents. And it would be nice if we could somehow get to that point as human beings where those of us in the peripheral of what's going on could step in and say, hey, something's not right here, and be listened to just once.
Well, thank you,
and
Todd.
I think that's a big point, and a big problem in this, because I think there are a lot of people who do want to step in, but they can't. Right. We're talking with Shavaun Scott right now about the Melodee Buzzard case, about how we got here, about all these yellow flags, all these red flags, over and over and over, where people were trying to say there is something wrong here. This is not safe for this child. And Todd, to your point, the relatives did say they were cut off. They were denied contact for extended periods. Now, we don't know much more beyond that. I don't have many statements. We don't know. Did they call multiple times? Did they call one time? Did they call at all? Did they just visit and go, you got to get your shit together, girl? And then nothing happened? We don't know. We don't know exactly what took place. But that's a big problem, because we've seen it in many cases where there is the infrastructure there. There are the loving grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, whatever, that are ready to step in and take those children and care for them the way that they need to be until eternity, or until that parent can get their shit together. But the system allows the parent who doesn't have their shit together to make that decision. It doesn't allow for the authorities to make that decision. It doesn't allow for the kids to make that decision. It doesn't allow for the 10 sane people over here who don't believe the government is listening to them through their dentures.
And the microwave.
It allows the person who thinks the government's listening to them through their dentures to make the decision of what's best for the child. And that is the big problem, is the system is working as it's designed right now. Is that fairly accurate, Shavaun?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that it's working exactly the way it's designed. And somebody made a comment right now. It's just tragic that there are so many people who would be wonderful parents who are dealing with infertility and can't have kids. And yet you have somebody who's a 15-year-old in the backseat of a car who's pregnant, and other people who are so desperately trying to get pregnant and can't. And it's rugged.
Relatives say that they were cut off, denied contact for extended periods here. I want to talk about that, and because that's the brick wall so many people run up against if they're facing an Ashley Buzzard in their family or somebody that they know when they're trying to step in. Calling, reporting over and over and over. What else can people do when they're basically, you got to deal with the situation and the tools that you have, and you're limited. What tools can be used to push the envelope as far as it needs to go so kids can get the help that they need when they got a mom like Ashley Buzzard?
I think, we're somewhat limited. The other thing that people can do is try to hire a lawyer, somebody who works in these kind of cases with family law experience, and see if there are other, things they can file with the court to try to get visitation. Ideally, we would do a better job with, coordinating law enforcement, schools, and mental health folks, and having crisis teams that you can call and say, just do a welfare check, get out there, get in that house, and then just keep calling multiple agencies, because the more you can keep the fire going under a situation like this, the greater the odds that you're going to get eventually some kind of response that may be helpful.
I mean, does a court need to step in at some point? Is there any levers that can be pulled? I mean, I know there's situations where people can get into a 72-hour hold and things of that nature for mental health emergencies. But I mean, the bar has to be a certain point. And again, we go back to local jurisdictions and everything depends on how they're handling everything. Yeah. But I mean, at what point? I mean, what is the bar here? So many people are, I think, baffled if they're into these situations at just the hoops of fire that you have to jump through to simply try and protect a child that's literally burning in a pit on the other side of the hoop of fire you're jumping through to save them out of.
Yeah, you're right. It's the bar is so high, and it shouldn't be. And we don't take enough action. We don't move quickly enough. We don't get people into some situation where they're going to be evaluated, and it's traumatizing for, I think, people that are aware of this, that work in the system as well, because they feel like their hands are tied. And the more outreach we can do, whenever there's a yellow flag, start getting somebody in the home. Homeschool families that don't show up for their meetings, when there are, school districts that require them to have some kind of a meeting, that should get an immediate response of someone in the home. But yeah, you can go into a house where there's hoarding going on, where it's, somewhat dangerous hygienically, where the children are not bathed, and that's not really enough to, meet the bar of these kids need to be out of there.
And that's the reality, is the bar. I mean, we have a bar very high to get in and say that there's a problem, but the bar is so low for what they're allowed to maintain and live in with their children. I mean, I'm going to assume it kind of comes down to, at the same point, the people who are making these decisions, the CPS workers going in there, also know, okay, well, what's the lesser of two evils here? Is it keeping the child in this hoarding house where obviously poor decisions are being made and this pile of shit could tip over at any time, possibly kill them? Or let's throw them to the system of we don't know where they're going to land.
Right.
It could be far, far away. And it's luck of the draw as far as who is screened well enough to be a parent and for what reasoning they're being a foster parent. There's great ones and there are monstrous ones.
Yeah.
And again, you are a complete luck of the draw. So it's none of this makes any sense. Yet we just keep going down this road of, well, this is how our system works. This is how we handle things. I mean, if you could enact something, if there could be something in the terms of legal levers that would be pulled or put into place, what needs to change, Shavaun, in your opinion, from everything that you've seen? What sort of across the board laws do we need in our country that would protect kids far better than what we're doing right now?
Yeah, it needs to be safety first, and more of an awareness with training in the court system about, as I say, trauma for children and what children's basic needs are to thrive. And safety first should be a national policy. And I think other countries do a better job at that than we do. And, it's just, we're not doing it at this point. And understanding that, as you said, people who don't have the capacity to meet their kids' basic needs in a functional, effective manner, you've got to acknowledge that sooner rather than wait until these kids are damaged or even killed in some cases.
I mean, is part of that thinking and part of the reason why we let this happen because many of us come up from places that were difficult, and some of us succeeded. Some of us, did good, and we didn't repeat the pattern of where we came from. And some look at that going, well, it benefited me. I pulled my bootstraps up and made it. And in some sort of weird, darkly cathartic, selfish way, are people looking at difficult situations that children are in going, well, it'll make them, it's character building. It'll make them stronger in some way, shapes, and forms. I feel like some of that goes on with the way that everyone examines these situations through their prisms.
Yeah, that's true. And it's just a lot more comfortable to entertain the idea that, kids can come out of this and be functional and normal, because most of the time they don't. I talked with one social worker once who was so frustrated about a case because the parents were heavy meth users and who knows what other substances, right? Because if you've got that, you've got other things going on too. But her only recourse was to say, you've got to get the needles off the floor, out of the reach of the kids. And, talk about a low bar, right? I mean,
that's not even a bar. That's just nothing.
Yeah.
It's and how is that? How is it even possible? How is the system saying that this is all you have to do? Tell them to get the needles off the floor. Who's making that call? Where is that in the handbook that it says this is all you have to do?
Yeah, I think there was probably a checklist, was there food in the refrigerator? Yes. Do the kids have shelter? Yes. Do the kids have shoes and clothing? Yes. And so it just didn't, they have to come up with a score. Here's the checklist. And okay, the needle's on the floor, that's a problem, but that doesn't meet the standard to take action to get the kids
That's
out.
not like an immediate, you're out.
Right.
Do we, God. Because then at the end of the day, true, because here's the big problem. If we were to enact some real sensible changes here, if we were to say, look, needles on the floor are not okay, that's an automatic, you lose your children.
Yeah.
If you do this, you automatically lose your children. If we started putting the automatics in there, there's not enough places for these kids to go.
No. And that's
why we keep them in these squalor situations, because we don't want to fund anything that could give them a safe place to go, because we don't have a safe place for them to go.
Yeah, very, very true. quality foster homes are, because we do know kids will do better in a family situation with parental figures who are nurturing and attuned to them. But we don't have enough of those places. And unfortunately, sometimes you have people who are fostering not because they really love and care about the kids, but because it's income for them. And we see bad outcomes from those cases. And then the system, people rail about why were these kids placed in foster care and then ended up dead there, or molested or something.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard. I could not work in this system just because the amount of contact I've had with abused kids tears me up emotionally.
Yeah.
I had one mom who really was in this category of not having the capacity to parent well, and she was limited in a lot of ways, including cognitively. And she brought in her little boy. I was working with the child. I think it was funded by CPS at the time. And so I was trying to do therapy with the little boy, and there was really nothing wrong with him other than inadequate home life and inadequate parenting. And mom brought him in one day with an ear infection, and she had a $10 copay for the antibiotic, and she didn't have the $10. And so she couldn't get him medication to clear up the infection. Who gave her the $10? I gave her the $10 and said, go get the medicine. And it's just, it's something most people would rather not think about.
And the compassion fatigue that will end up being so prevalent with caretakers and people like you in the mental health system, in the, medicinal, medicinal, that's not what I meant. In the medical field. I mean, it's just every contact they have with these cases. I can't tell you how many times I paid for veterinary care for animals that couldn't, the people couldn't do just the most basic thing. They brought them in, they got a free exam because they were a first-time client, but they couldn't pay for medication that the animal desperately needed.
Yeah.
I did that out of pocket. You can't keep doing that. It takes a toll on you as much as you want to and you need to. You just can't keep doing it. And our system is not set up for people who can't afford care.
Right. And I can totally see you doing that. So bless you.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, because you can't rescue people from all of their problems over and over and over. It's just, that's not the solution. The people with the problems need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. I mean, and at the end of the day, take the kids out of it. You have hordes of people that can't manage basic life. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality of it. And they reproduce faster than others. Mm-hmm. So we're dealing with a massive issue here of hordes of incompetent zombie-like beings that some, probably can be educated and fixed and helped. Others are going to eternally be just wreaking havoc wherever they go, because that's the card they were dealt when sperm met an egg, because it was two other people that were just as messed up. And we don't seem to have any real plan to deal with any of it other than just, well, let them keep fucking. This is, I mean, it's true. I mean, I'm harsh on it but it's true. It's what we're dealing with. And how do we deal with it? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I would think the first step would be not allowing to continue to have children might be part of it.
Yeah. It's very, very, very frustrating. And the other piece of it is kids who are really poorly parented, from birth on, most of the time do not end up functional people. And so then you have this cycle of, a lot of people who function very poorly and don't raise their kids well. And then you have a whole new generation that's why I think we have so many social problems in this country, because, you've got generations of people who are doing a very poor job, inadequate job, let's say, of raising their kids.
Yeah.
It's an interesting comment. MNT7949 said, and I don't know if this is true, and I'm not questioning what you're putting here, but I just want to qualify it. It says, as someone is getting close to becoming unqualified for SNAP, they are required to attend a class. The class outlines life changes which may keep them qualified, one of which is having a baby. If that is true, it seems like an incentive to just have child after child after child to stay in the system.
Yeah, we have had a problem in that area. I'm not sure about that particular case with SNAP and if that's true everywhere, but it certainly could be. And it used to be that every time a person got pregnant, I remember in high school, I went to a rough high school, and there were girls whose goal, one of my friends, in fact, her life goal was, I'm going to have a baby and then I can get welfare. And of course, I'm not speaking of everybody who's on aid, because there are many people who just have something go wrong in their lives and they end up needing those services. So it's not a judgment on everybody, but there have been situations where people looked at this as, this is a way out of poverty, is to have a child, and then I'm going to qualify for aid to families with dependent children. So there's so many tricky ways that this can go wrong, and it gets really complicated on how do we fix it. I think funding Planned Parenthood, we've removed funding from it now because of political things, and we've eliminated abortion entirely in many parts of the country. And so people who know they're not ready and able to care for children are having children. And if the laws continue to go in that direction, you're going to have more and more and more poorly parented kids from people who don't even want to be having kids.
And more and more crime, which will continue to rise, which it's no coincidence that when abortion became legal in our country, roughly around 18 years later, there was a big dip in crime.
Yes.
I wonder why that would be. I wonder, because those people never came to the world.
Yeah. That was a good
But then
book.
we're going to complain about it. Because it's a precious, we're going to care. We're a precious child. We don't give a shit. Once you're out here, you're good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. You're to the wolves.
I read that book too. That was a very interesting statistic in the case for that the crime rate went down once abortion was legalized. And I know so many women, of course, who have had abortions. And I don't want to offend all the pro-lifers out there, right? They've got their argument. I get that. But on the other hand, when someone knows, I'm 14 years old, I cannot care for a baby, and they're coming from a house with substance abuse, and there's no support system for them. And you're talking about kids that are going to be raised in these kind of situations.
Pro-life doesn't just mean, and it shouldn't just mean giving a shit when the kid is in the female before it's actually born. It means you have to give a shit about it afterwards.
100%.
And if you don't, then you're not pro-life.
Yep.
So anyone who's sitting there like, all pro-life, I'm going to stand out here with my sign, but then I'm going to criticize all these people who are making horrible life choices, who are coming from squalor and people making bad decisions. Well, guess what? You get to jump into that pool too and give a shit about them, because that's part of this. You can't have one without the other. So Yeah, we want people to work. We don't want people on aid. And yet we still want to basically force them to have children that they can't care for, and they can't get jobs, because who can afford $2,000 a month for childcare when you're only earning $1,500 a month to live on in a low paying job? And people aren't looking at the big picture here. They're thinking of these Band-Aids, and there's just not a lot of thought going on. It's check a box, pretend it's not bothering me, la, 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 la. Everything is great in my world. Oh, did Junior just essay two 16-year-olds and nearly choke one out? Oh, la, 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 la. Everything's great. That's the type of world that we live in right now. Yeah. Reference to the Jesse Butler case. Yeah. But that's how I feel. That is how it is. Well, I'm glad we solved all the world's problems again today. Yeah. Or just brought them all to light. I think you're doing a big service by bringing them to light, because, again, it's just social denial. People don't like thinking about it. I mean, I don't enjoy thinking about it, but I still read these cases because I'm like you. I want to try to understand, where did we go wrong here and what can we do? Well, what's most disturbing about the Buzzard case to me is, the system is working as planned. The fact that Ashley Buzzard could drive many states away, have a wig on her kid. People know there's a mental health problem with this woman. There's report after report of it not being a safe condition, but she still has the kid. She can make the kid disappear, tell no one where they are. and for a month not be arrested. It's like, really? Really, this is how this is. You can't, like, some right here that she has that we can't really force her to talk. That her rights of not talking trump somehow forcing her or coercing her or making her suffer until she spits out where the hell this little girl is. Make her uncomfortable enough that she has to speak. But we have no mechanisms to do so. And we honor that like it's some sort of golden goat that we can't violate this. But meanwhile, she might be dead somewhere in a ditch in Nebraska. We don't really know. Talk to mom. Well, we can't. That might make her feel uncomfortable. It might violate her rights. America.
Yeah, it made me think of the Daybell case and how long JJ was missing. And at least we did have law enforcement kick in and start to get pushy about we need to verify where this child is. But I can't remember how long it took before that started happening. But you did have the grandmother who was being a broken record about it.
Yeah,
and saying,
she was. And that's a prime example. Larry and Kay Woodcock were all over it. They were being a broken record left and right. And what happened? The kids ended up melted in a bucket in Chad Daybell's backyard.
Yep.
Yeah.
And while those two are off in Hawaii playing the ukulele and getting married on Shipwreck Beach. I mean,
there should be a Daybell statute that, you know what, after a certain amount of time, if you haven't produced your child, the Daybell statute kicks in and we go and find your damn kid.
Yeah, how about like 5 minutes? Like if the police show up and where are your kids? And the answer is, I'm not telling you, or I don't know. Well, then guess what? You're going with us. There should never be a reason that you couldn't speak to authorities as to where your children are. And if there is, then you're probably breaking a law. If you can't logically tell someone, my kids are over here and they're safe. And this is why. I mean, granted, Lori did lie and say that the kids were at Frozen watching the movie. But again, that would require follow-up and the ability to do so. And
the
again,
movie's like 2.5 hours. I mean, so what happened after 2.5 hours?
Yeah.
Nothing. Exactly. It's like, no, they're over here. They're staying with, then prove it. But then you got the interstate dynamics. We need a national system that does something because right now it's really easy to hide a kid, lose a kid, steal a kid, sell a kid, do whatever you want with a kid because there's not a lot protecting them if you have a nefarious caregiver in charge. Only in America. Let's hear a verse from the Brooks and Dunn song about this shit. I'd love that. Your thoughts in the comments section, everyone. We would love to hear them, and please do share this because I can guarantee the algorithms of YouTube are going to go, this is an icky topic. People don't like to be uncomfortable. So share the shit out of it so people realize, hey, this is actually happening, and maybe things can change. There's a thought. Until next time, for Stacey, Todd, and Shavaun, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.